1963, Turkish Air Force Captain İlhan Durupınar was flying a routine reconnaissance mission over the remote Anatolian plateau when he spotted something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about human history. Carved into the weathered stone of a mountainside, geometric patterns emerged with such mathematical precision they could only be properly seen from thousands of feet above. What ground explorers had walked past for millennia was suddenly visible from the sky, intricate engravings that seemed to pulse with impossible knowledge. When archaeologists finally reached the site, they uncovered stone tablets covered in markings that defied explanation. Carbon dating would later reveal these weren't just ancient, they were 12,000 years old, created when humans were supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers, barely capable of crafting simple tools. But the real shock came when cartographers tried to decode what they'd found. The coordinates pointed to nowhere on Earth. The stellar alignments referenced star positions from either the distant past or an entirely different perspective. Someone with advanced knowledge had carved a map of somewhere else entirely, then buried the evidence for over 100 centuries. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Turkish highlands as Captain Durupınar banked his aircraft into another sweep of the desolate terrain below. Standard reconnaissance flights over this region had become routine, mile after mile of barren rock and scattered villages, the same geological features his squadron had photographed dozens of times before. The Anatolian plateau stretched endlessly beneath his wings, a landscape that seemed frozen in time, untouched by the rapid changes sweeping across the world in the early 1960s. But something was different that day. As the captain adjusted his flight path to catch the optimal angle of morning light, geometric shadows emerged from what should have been natural rock formations, patterns too precise to be accidental, too mathematical to be random erosion. From ground level, these markings would appear as little more than weathered stone and natural cracks. From 2,000 feet above, they revealed themselves as something extraordinary. Intricate designs that seemed to have been waiting centuries for someone to achieve the proper perspective. Durupınar circled back, his training telling him to document anything unusual. Through his camera lens, the patterns became even more defined. What he was seeing wasn't the random scarring of wind and weather. These were deliberate engravements, carved with a precision that suggested advanced planning and mathematical understanding. The geometric forms extended across several acres of mountainside, their layout following principles that wouldn't be out of place in a modern engineering textbook. The captain's initial report sparked immediate interest from Turkish archaeological authorities. Professor Süleyman Demirel from Ankara University was among the first to examine the aerial photographs, and what he saw contradicted decades of accepted knowledge about the region's history. The Anatolian plateau was considered archaeologically significant, but primarily for much later civilizations, Byzantine churches, Roman settlements, early Turkish fortifications. No one had expected to find evidence of sophisticated geometric knowledge predating all known advanced cultures in the area. Within weeks, an expedition was organized to reach the remote site. The journey itself proved challenging, requiring specialized climbing equipment and multiple days of hiking through terrain that had clearly discouraged casual exploration for generations. As the team approached the carved mountainside, the true scale of the discovery became apparent. What appeared as modest patterns from the air revealed themselves as massive engravings, some individual geometric forms spanning dozens of feet across. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in ancient cartography brought in to examine the findings, later described her first glimpse of the carvings as stepping into a library written in stone, but in a language no one had taught us to read. The precision was immediately obvious. Lines carved to exact specifications, angles that demonstrated understanding of advanced geometric principles, astronomical alignments that suggested the creators possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. The archaeological team's initial assessment revealed several disturbing facts. First, the carving technique itself was unlike anything previously discovered from the region's known historical periods. The tools required to achieve such precision in solid rock would have demanded metallurgical capabilities far beyond what was thought possible for ancient Anatolian civilizations. Second, the sheer scope of the project suggested a coordinated effort involving significant manpower and resources, the kind of undertaking typically associated with major urban centers, not remote mountainside settlements. But perhaps most unsettling was the mathematical sophistication evident in the geometric patterns. These weren't simple decorative motifs or religious symbols. They demonstrated understanding of complex spatial relationships, astronomical calculations, and what appeared to be cartographic principles. Dr. Vasquez noted that several of the angle measurements corresponded to precise stellar alignments, while others seemed to reference coordinate systems that wouldn't be developed by mainstream civilization for thousands of years. As news of the discovery spread through academic circles, initial excitement began mixing with professional skepticism. The implications were simply too radical for comfortable acceptance. If these carvings were authentic and as old as preliminary estimates suggested, they would require a complete revision of the timeline for human technological development. Advanced geometric knowledge, sophisticated carving techniques, and apparent astronomical calculations, all from a period when humans were supposedly still learning basic agriculture. The Turkish government, recognizing the potential significance of the find, restricted access to the site while authorizing comprehensive scientific analysis. Carbon dating samples from organic materials found in the carved grooves would provide the first objective measure of the carving's age. Spectrographic analysis of the stone itself would reveal the techniques and tools used in their creation. Astronomical calculations would determine whether the apparent stellar alignments were intentional or coincidental. What emerged from these initial studies challenged every assumption about the site's origins. The organic carbon samples consistently returned dates of approximately 12,000 years, placing the carvings firmly in the pre-agricultural period, thousands of years before the emergence of known advanced civilizations in the region. The spectrographic analysis revealed tool marks suggesting metallurgical capabilities that shouldn't have existed in the area for millennia after the calculated creation date. Most puzzling of all were the astronomical alignments. Dr. Vasquez's calculations revealed that the geometric patterns precisely matched stellar positions that would have been visible from the site's location, but only 12,000 years ago. The creators hadn't simply carved random designs. They had created a permanent record of the night sky as it appeared during the exact period indicated by the carbon dating. Yet something remained fundamentally wrong with the coordinate calculations. When Dr. Vasquez attempted to map the geometric relationships to known geographical features, the results made no sense. The proportions were incorrect for the surrounding terrain. The directional indicators pointed to magnetic orientations that didn't match Earth's magnetic field during any known historical period. The mathematical relationships seemed to describe a landscape that bore no resemblance to the Anatolian Plateau or any other region on the planet. Captain Durupınar's routine reconnaissance flight had uncovered something that shouldn't exist. Evidence of advanced knowledge from an era when such capabilities were impossible, created by people who seemed to be mapping a world that wasn't their own. The carvings represented either a complete misunderstanding of human technological development or evidence that our ancestors possessed knowledge that had been systematically forgotten or deliberately suppressed. As the initial shock of the discovery settled into methodical scientific analysis, one question began dominating every discussion among the research team. If these 12,000-year-old carvings really did represent advanced cartographic and astronomical knowledge, who had created them? And perhaps more disturbing, what exactly were they trying to map? The answers to those questions would prove far stranger than anyone had imagined, challenging not just archaeological timelines, but the very foundations of how we understand human origins and capabilities. The geometric patterns carved into that remote mountainside weren't just mathematical curiosities. They were the first clues in a mystery that would force scientists to confront the possibility that our understanding of ancient human knowledge was not just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. Carbon dating analyses during her 20-year career at the International Archaeological Dating Laboratory in Zurich. She'd processed samples from Egyptian tombs, Viking settlements, and Mesopotamian ruins, each one fitting neatly into the established timeline of human civilization. But the organic materials scraped from the grooves of the Anatolian stone carvings would challenge everything she thought she knew about scientific accuracy and academic honesty. The samples arrived with minimal documentation, standard procedure for controversial finds that might bias analysis. Chen's team followed their usual protocols, cleaning the samples of modern contamination, preparing them for accelerator mass spectrometry, running multiple tests to ensure consistency. The process took 3 weeks, and the results came back with disturbing precision. Every sample tested independently by different technicians using separate equipment returned the same date range, 11,800 to 12,200 years before present. Chen ran the tests again, then a third time. Each analysis confirmed what should have been impossible: organic material from a period when humans in the region were supposedly nomadic hunter-gatherers, existing in small bands with no permanent settlements, no advanced tools, and certainly no capability for the kind of massive stone carving project these samples represented. The implications sent shockwaves through the archaeological establishment. If the dating was accurate, it meant that sophisticated geometric knowledge, advanced carving techniques, and complex astronomical calculations had existed in Anatolia during the Younger Dryas period, a time of extreme climate instability when most human populations were focused simply on survival. It was as if someone had discovered evidence of nuclear technology in a medieval monastery. Professor James Whitfield from Cambridge University received Chen's preliminary report with barely concealed alarm. As editor of the Journal of Archaeological Science, he'd built his reputation on maintaining academic standards and preventing fringe theories from contaminating legitimate research. The Anatolian samples represented exactly the kind of anomalous data that could fuel decades of pseudo-scientific speculation if not handled carefully. Whitfield's response was swift and decisive. He organized a peer review panel comprising some of Europe's most respected archaeological scientists, requesting that each member examine the dating methodology independently. Dr. Heinrich Müller from the Max Planck Institute, Professor Sarah Davidson from Oxford, and Dr. Roberto Fernandez from the University of Madrid each received samples and documentation with instructions to verify or refute Chen's findings. The peer review process typically took 6 months. In this case, it stretched to nearly 2 years, according to leaked correspondence that would later surface. The delay wasn't due to technical difficulties. It was caused by the profound reluctance of established scientists to validate results that would require rewriting textbooks and acknowledging that fundamental assumptions about human development were wrong. Dr. Muller's analysis confirmed Chen's dating with even greater precision. placing the samples at 12,050 years before present, plus or minus 30 years. Davidson's independent testing returned virtually identical results. Fernandez initially reported contamination issues, but when pressed to provide specifics, quietly withdrew his objections. The scientific evidence was overwhelming and consistent. These carvings predated known advanced civilizations in the region by thousands of years. Yet the academic response was anything but acceptance. Professor Whitfield published an editorial questioning whether carbon dating was appropriate for samples recovered from exposed mountainside locations, suggesting that environmental contamination might have skewed the results. Dr. Timothy Harrison from the University of Pennsylvania published a paper arguing that the geometric patterns might have been natural formations accidentally enhanced by much later human activity. The controversy deepened when Dr. Chen requested permission to conduct additional analysis using cutting-edge dating techniques that could potentially resolve any remaining uncertainties. Her request was denied by the Turkish Ministry of Culture, which cited concerns about depleting the limited sample material. When Chen applied for funding to develop new non-destructive dating methods specifically for the project, her grant applications were mysteriously rejected by institutions that had previously supported her research. According to documents later obtained through Freedom of Information requests, the rejections weren't based on scientific merit. Internal emails revealed coordination between various archaeological institutions to suppress research that might validate the impossible dates. Professor Whitfield's correspondence with colleagues described the samples as potentially catastrophic to established chronologies and suggested that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, evidence we cannot afford to provide. The suppression effort extended beyond academic journals. Media coverage of the discovery was limited and carefully managed, focusing on the visual spectacle of the aerial photographs while downplaying the dating implications. Science documentaries that attempted to explore the chronological controversy found their funding withdrawn or their broadcast schedules mysteriously altered. Educational institutions that included the find in their curriculum were encouraged to present it as an example of dating methodology problems rather than legitimate archaeological evidence. But the evidence itself couldn't be suppressed entirely. Chen's original data had been shared with international colleagues before the institutional pressure began. Independent researchers in Japan, Australia, and Brazil confirmed her results using their own dating techniques. The scientific consensus among actual laboratory technicians was clear. The organic material from the Anatolian carvings was genuinely 12,000 years old. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still struggling to decode the mathematical relationships in the stone patterns, found herself caught between the mounting scientific evidence and increasing professional pressure to distance herself from the project. Her preliminary reports describing sophisticated geometric knowledge had been submitted to multiple journals, only to be rejected for insufficient contextual framework, academic language for conclusions that challenged established narratives. The contradiction became impossible to ignore. The most advanced dating techniques available consistently confirmed that the carvings were created during humanity's supposed infancy of technological development. The mathematical sophistication evident in the patterns suggested knowledge that mainstream archaeology claimed didn't exist for thousands of years after the established date. Either the dating was catastrophically wrong, which multiple independent laboratories had ruled out, or the accepted timeline of human advancement was fundamentally flawed. Vasquez's analysis revealed additional disturbing details that made the chronological problem even worse. The astronomical alignments carved into the stone precisely matched stellar positions from 12,000 years ago, but they demonstrated understanding of precession, the gradual shift in Earth's axis that changes the apparent position of stars over thousands of years. Calculating precession requires sustained astronomical observation across multiple generations and mathematical capabilities that weren't supposed to exist until the development of advanced civilizations. The creators of these carvings hadn't simply recorded the night sky as they saw it. They had understood how stellar positions changed over time and had carved permanent markers that would allow future observers to calculate when the alignments were created. This suggested not just advanced knowledge, but deliberate intention to communicate across vast spans of time, a kind of astronomical time capsule left by people who knew their civilization might not survive. Chen's continued analysis of additional organic samples revealed another troubling pattern. The dates weren't scattered across centuries or millennia, as might be expected from a site used repeatedly by different cultures. Instead, they clustered tightly around a single time period, approximately 12,000 years ago, with most samples falling within a span of less than 50 years. This suggested intensive, coordinated activity during a specific historical moment, not gradual development over extended periods. The tight dating cluster implied that whatever had created the Anatolian carvings had happened quickly and deliberately, undertaken by people with sophisticated knowledge who had chosen this specific location and time for reasons that remained mysterious. The precision of both the dating and the geometric calculations suggested planning and execution capabilities that challenged everything scholars thought they knew about humanity's technological development. As academic pressure to suppress the findings intensified, some researchers began asking uncomfortable questions about what other discoveries might have been similarly buried. Were the Anatolian carvings unique, or were they part of a pattern of advanced ancient knowledge that had been systematically excluded from mainstream archaeology? How many other sites had produced impossible dates that were quietly shelved rather than investigated? The carbon dating catastrophe represented more than just conflicting scientific data. It revealed the extent to which academic institutions would go to protect established narratives, even when confronted with overwhelming physical evidence. The precise, consistent, and independently verified dating of the samples should have been cause for celebration, a remarkable window into previously unknown human capabilities. Instead, it became a professional liability that threatened careers and challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which entire academic disciplines were built. The scientific method demands that theories conform to evidence, not the other way around. But when evidence threatens institutional power and professional reputations, the scientific method itself becomes a casualty. The Anatolian samples represented exactly this kind of threat, data so clear and compelling that acknowledging it would require admitting that generations of scholars had been wrong about humanity's most basic developmental timeline. What remained was a question that haunted every researcher who had examined the samples. If 12,000-year-old humans could create mathematically sophisticated stone carvings with astronomical precision, what other capabilities might they have possessed? And perhaps more disturbing, if this evidence could be so systematically suppressed by modern institutions, what other truths about human history might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to acknowledge what the data actually revealed? When Dr. David Ashworth first examined the geometric measurements from the Anatolian site, he assumed there had been a mistake in the field documentation. As Cambridge University's leading expert in ancient mathematical systems, he'd spent decades studying everything from Babylonian calculation tablets to Mayan astronomical calendars. But the precision evident in these 12,000-year-old carvings exceeded anything he'd encountered from civilizations that were supposedly far more advanced. The measurements were recorded to hundredths of degrees, an accuracy level that required instrumentation that wouldn't be invented for millennia. The angles between carved lines held mathematical relationships that demonstrated understanding of principles not formally discovered until the Renaissance. Most disturbing of all, the geometric patterns incorporated corrections for Earth's curvature and magnetic declination, calculations that demanded knowledge of the planet's true shape and orientation in space. Ashworth's initial analysis focused on what appeared to be the simplest elements, straight lines carved into the rock's surface. Using laser measurement tools, his team determined that these lines deviated from perfect straightness by less than 2 millimeters across distances exceeding 30 meters. Achieving such precision in solid stone would challenge modern engineering capabilities, even with computer-controlled cutting equipment. For ancient carvers working with primitive tools, it should have been physically impossible. The angular measurements presented an even more profound puzzle. The creators had carved intersecting lines that formed precise geometric relationships, angles that corresponded exactly to mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. But these weren't approximate relationships that might occur by chance or artistic intuition. They were exact to multiple decimal places, demonstrating numerical precision that required sophisticated calculation methods. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in ancient astronomy brought in to verify the site's celestial alignments, discovered that the geometric patterns incorporated even more complex mathematical relationships. Several of the carved angles precisely matched the Earth's axial tilt, the angle of the ecliptic, and other astronomical constants that ancient peoples weren't supposed to understand. The creators hadn't simply carved decorative patterns, they had encoded fundamental properties of planetary motion into permanent stone records. The precision extended beyond individual measurements to the overall layout of the carvings. Using GPS coordinates and satellite photography, Mitchell's team mapped the relationship between different carved sections across the mountainside. The geometric patterns formed a coherent mathematical system spanning several square kilometers, with proportional relationships maintained across vast distances. Creating such a layout would have required surveying capabilities and mathematical planning that exceeded anything known from the ancient world. But perhaps most unsettling was the discovery of what appeared to be error correction built into the geometric patterns. When natural irregularities in the rock surface would have disrupted the mathematical relationships, the carvers had compensated by adjusting nearby angles or line lengths to maintain overall precision. This suggested not just understanding of complex geometric principles, but the ability to perform real-time calculations and modifications during the carving process. Professor Elena Vasquez had been struggling with one particular section of carvings that seemed to incorporate coordinate systems unlike anything used in ancient mapping. The lines suggested latitude and longitude measurements, but when calculated according to any known historical system, they pointed to locations that didn't correspond to recognizable geographical features. It was as if the carvers were using a coordinate system based on a different reference point than Earth's equator and prime meridian. Ashworth's mathematical analysis of these coordinate patterns revealed something even stranger. The numbers weren't random or symbolic. They formed precise mathematical sequences that demonstrated understanding of advanced trigonometric principles. The calculations required to generate such sequences wouldn't be formally developed by human mathematicians until the development of calculus thousands of years later. Yet here they were, carved in stone by people who supposedly hadn't even invented agriculture. The tool marks left in the stone provided additional evidence of impossible capabilities. Microscopic analysis revealed cutting patterns that suggested the use of extremely hard, precisely shaped instruments. The cuts showed none of the irregular chipping or rough edges typical of stone tools. Instead, They displayed the clean, consistent characteristics of cuts made with metal implements. But metallurgy, advanced enough to create such tools, wasn't supposed to exist in the region until thousands of years after the established dating. Dr. Mitchell's examination of the astronomical elements revealed another layer of mathematical sophistication that challenged every assumption about ancient knowledge. The carved patterns didn't simply record stellar positions as they appeared to naked-eye observers. They incorporated corrections for atmospheric refraction, the slight bending of starlight as it passes through Earth's atmosphere. Calculating such corrections requires understanding of optical principles and atmospheric physics that weren't formally discovered until the modern era. The precision of these astronomical calculations extended to phenomena that would be invisible without advanced instrumentation. Several of the geometric patterns aligned with the positions of planets during specific time periods, but the alignments accounted for planetary motion with accuracy that required mathematical prediction of orbital mechanics. The carvers had somehow calculated where planets would be in their orbits during future time periods, demonstrating understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be achieved by mainstream astronomy until the space age. Ashworth found himself confronting a paradox that challenged his fundamental understanding of human intellectual development. The mathematical concepts demonstrated in the carvings represented knowledge that should have required thousands of years of accumulated learning, built upon foundations of writing, number systems, and formal education. Yet the dating evidence consistently placed these achievements in a period when humans were supposedly pre-literate nomads with no permanent settlements or educational institutions. The geometric patterns also revealed evidence of mathematical concepts that hadn't been formally recognized until relatively recent times. Some of the angular relationships corresponded to properties of non-Euclidean geometry, mathematical systems that weren't developed until the 19th century. Others incorporated principles from topology and advanced calculus that remained cutting-edge areas of mathematical research. The ancient carvers seem to have understood mathematical truths that modern mathematicians had struggled for centuries to discover. When Ashworth attempted to publish his findings, the response from academic journals was immediate and uncompromising. Peer reviewers questioned not just his conclusions, but his competence as a mathematician. The precision measurements were dismissed as the result of selective reporting or measurement errors. The mathematical relationships were explained away as coincidental patterns that inevitably emerge when enough geometric forms are analyzed together. But the evidence itself couldn't be dismissed so easily. Independent verification by mathematical specialists from universities across Europe confirmed Ashworth's calculations. The precision was real, the relationships were intentional, and the mathematical sophistication was undeniable. What remained unexplained was how people living 12,000 years ago had possessed knowledge that surpassed the capabilities of most modern engineering projects. Dr. Mitchell's continued analysis of the astronomical elements revealed additional precision that made the paradox even more acute. The carved patterns incorporated corrections not just for Earth's atmospheric refraction, but for the gravitational lensing effects of the Sun and Moon, phenomena that require understanding of general relativity and weren't discovered until Einstein's theories in the early 20th century. The ancient carvers had somehow accounted for the subtle bending of starlight caused by massive objects, calculations that demand sophisticated understanding of space-time physics. The mathematical precision evident in every aspect of the carvings suggested capabilities that transcended individual genius or accidental discovery. The knowledge required to create such patterns would have demanded institutional learning, accumulated over generations, supported by educational systems and recorded knowledge. Yet according to accepted archaeological timelines, no such institutions existed during the period when the carvings were created. Ashworth began to suspect that the precision paradox represented more than just an archaeological anomaly. The mathematical sophistication was so far beyond what should have been possible that it suggested the involvement of people who possessed knowledge systems entirely different from the gradual development assumed by conventional history. Either human intellectual capabilities 12,000 years ago were radically different from current assumptions, or the carved patterns represented knowledge that had originated from a source outside the normal development of human learning. The implications extended beyond archaeology into fundamental questions about the nature of human knowledge itself. If such precision was possible 12,000 years ago, why had it taken so long for similar capabilities to re-emerge in recorded history? What had happened to the people who possessed this knowledge? And perhaps most disturbing, if this level of sophistication could be systematically ignored by modern scholars, what other evidence of advanced ancient capabilities might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to acknowledge what the measurements actually revealed? The precision paradox wasn't just about ancient mathematics, it was about the willingness of modern institutions to confront evidence that challenged their fundamental assumptions about human development. The measurements were clear, the calculations were verified, and the implications were unavoidable. Somewhere in humanity's forgotten past, people had possessed knowledge that exceeded anything found in the historical record, knowledge so advanced that acknowledging it would require rewriting the entire story of human intellectual achievement. Dr. Eleanor Vasquez had spent 18 months attempting to map the coordinate relationships carved into the Anatolian stone, and every calculation led to the same impossible conclusion. The geometric patterns weren't depicting Earth. The proportional relationships, directional indicators, and mathematical constants all pointed to a world with different physical properties, different magnetic orientations, different gravitational relationships, and a fundamentally different relationship between land masses and celestial mechanics. The breakthrough came when Vasquez abandoned her attempts to force the coordinates into Earth-based mapping systems and instead analyzed them as pure mathematical relationships. Treating the carved patterns as an abstract coordinate grid revealed an internally consistent system that followed logical geographical principles, but principles that described a planet with characteristics unlike anything in our solar system. The first anomaly had appeared during Vasquez's initial attempts to correlate the carved directional indicators with known magnetic orientations. Every ancient mapping system showed some relationship to magnetic north, even accounting for historical variations in Earth's magnetic field. But the Anatolian coordinates consistently pointed to magnetic orientations that had never existed on Earth during any known geological period. The magnetic declination calculations suggested a planet with multiple magnetic poles or a fundamentally different magnetic field structure. Professor James Harrison from the Royal Geographic Society initially dismissed Vasquez's findings as calculation errors. As one of the world's leading experts in historical cartography, he'd examined everything from medieval European maps to Chinese navigation charts spanning thousands of years. Every legitimate ancient map showed recognizable relationships to actual geographical features, even when distorted by primitive surveying techniques or symbolic representation. The idea that an ancient map might depict a completely different world was, in his words, cartographic fantasy. But when Harrison examined Vasquez's mathematical analysis, his skepticism began to crack. The coordinate relationships weren't random or symbolic. They formed coherent geographical patterns that followed logical mapping principles. Rivers flowed downhill according to elevation markers. Coastal features showed realistic relationships between land and water. Mountain ranges displayed geological consistency across vast distances. Everything about the coordinate system suggested real, geographical features, just not features that existed on Earth. The scale relationships presented another fundamental problem. When Vasquez calculated the distances represented by the coordinate intervals, they suggested a planet significantly larger than Earth. The mathematical relationships indicated a world with approximately 40% greater circumference, which would require substantially different gravitational characteristics to maintain stable atmospheric and oceanic conditions. Such a planet could theoretically support Earth-like conditions, but it would represent a completely different world with its own unique physical properties. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's astronomical analysis added another layer of impossibility to the coordinate problem. The celestial reference points carved into the stone, the stellar alignments that had initially seemed to confirm Earth-based observations, actually described star positions as they would appear from a different planetary perspective. The angular relationships between constellations matched what observers would see from a world with a different orbital distance from its sun and a different axial tilt. The astronomical calculations suggested something even more disturbing. The star positions weren't just different, they were different in ways that required observation from outside our solar system entirely. The angular relationships between stellar objects indicated a viewing position thousands of light years from Earth, observing star patterns from a perspective that would be impossible for any planet orbiting our sun. The ancient carvers had somehow created astronomical charts depicting the night sky as seen from an alien world. Vasquez's continued analysis revealed coordinate patterns that described geographical features unlike anything found on Earth. The carved patterns suggested continental configurations that didn't match any known planetary formation. Vast landmasses connected by narrow isthmuses, inland seas larger than any found on our planet, and mountain ranges that extended across impossible distances. The geography was coherent and realistic, but realistic for a world that wasn't our own. The elevational markers embedded in the coordinate system provided additional evidence of alien geography. The carved patterns indicated elevation changes that exceeded anything found on Earth, mountain ranges higher than Everest extending for thousands of kilometers, ocean trenches deeper than the Mariana Trench, spanning entire continental areas. The topographical relationships suggested a planet with more extreme geological features than Earth could support under known physical laws. When Vasquez attempted to model the implied planetary characteristics using the coordinate data, the results described a world that challenged astronomical understanding. The size, mass, and gravitational relationships indicated a planet that should exist in a different orbital zone than Earth, closer to its star to maintain Earth-like temperatures despite its larger size, but with atmospheric properties that could support the climate zones suggested by the geographical patterns. Professor Harrison found himself confronting evidence that contradicted 40 years of cartographic expertise. The coordinate relationships were mathematically sound, geographically coherent, and astronomically consistent. But they described a world that existed nowhere in known space. Either the ancient carvers had possessed impossible knowledge of alien worlds, or they had created the most sophisticated fictional geography in human history, complete with mathematical precision that exceeded the capabilities of modern planetary modeling. The dating evidence made the coordinate mystery even more profound. These weren't medieval fantasy maps or modern science fiction. They were 12,000-year-old stone carvings created by people who supposedly hadn't developed writing, mathematics, or astronomy. Yet somehow they had created detailed maps of a world that existed only in their imagination. or perhaps in their memory of a place they had somehow visited. Dr. Mitchell's analysis of the atmospheric indicators suggested another layer of impossible knowledge. Several of the carved patterns seemed to represent weather systems and atmospheric circulation patterns, but patterns that would occur on a planet with different rotational characteristics and atmospheric composition. The ancient carvers had understood meteorological principles that wouldn't be discovered on Earth until the development of modern atmospheric science, and they had applied these principles to model weather systems on an alien world. The coordinate system also incorporated timekeeping elements that didn't correspond to Earth's rotational or orbital periods. The mathematical relationships suggested a world with different day and year lengths, requiring adjustments to astronomical calculations that presupposed knowledge of comparative planetary mechanics. The carvers had somehow understood that different worlds would have different temporal relationships and had created a mapping system that accounted for these variations. Vasquez's attempts to publish her coordinate analysis met with immediate institutional resistance. Journal editors refused to consider papers that suggested ancient maps of alien worlds. Peer reviewers dismissed her mathematical proofs without examination, claiming that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence they weren't willing to evaluate. Academic conferences cancelled her presentations, citing concerns about professional credibility and institutional reputation. But the mathematical evidence couldn't be suppressed entirely. Independent verification by cartographic specialists from universities in Asia and South America confirmed Vasquez's calculations. The coordinate relationships were real, the geographical patterns were coherent, and the astronomical alignments were mathematically precise. What remained unexplained was how 12,000-year-old humans had created detailed maps of a world that existed nowhere in known space. The suppression efforts revealed something disturbing about modern academic institutions. When confronted with evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions, the response wasn't scientific investigation but professional ostracism. Researchers who validated the coordinate analysis found their funding reduced, their publications rejected, and their career advancement blocked. The academic establishment seemed more interested in protecting established narratives than investigating potentially revolutionary discoveries. Harrison's continued analysis revealed additional coordinate patterns that made the mystery even more acute. The carved maps weren't just depicting one alien world. They seemed to show multiple interconnected geographical regions that might represent different areas of the same large planet, or possibly different worlds entirely. The mathematical transitions between coordinate systems suggested knowledge of comparative planetology that wouldn't be achieved by Earth-based astronomy until the space age. The implications extended beyond archaeology into fundamental questions about human origins and capabilities. If ancient peoples could create accurate maps of alien worlds, they must have possessed knowledge that transcended anything found in the historical record. Either they had developed theoretical modeling capabilities that exceeded modern science, or they had somehow obtained direct observational data from worlds beyond Earth. The coordinate mystery represented more than just cartographic anomalies. It suggested that human knowledge 12,000 years ago included understanding of other worlds, other geographies, and other astronomical systems. The mathematical precision and geographical coherence of the alien maps indicated that this wasn't fantasy or speculation, but detailed knowledge based on actual information about worlds that existed somewhere beyond Earth's immediate vicinity. What remained was a question that haunted every researcher who examined the coordinate evidence. How had ancient humans obtained detailed geographical and astronomical information about alien worlds? The mathematical precision suggested direct observation rather than theoretical modeling. The geographical coherence indicated sustained study rather than casual speculation. Somewhere in humanity's forgotten past, people had possessed knowledge of other worlds that modern science was only beginning to acknowledge might exist. When Dr. Sarah Mitchell first calculated the stellar positions depicted in the Anatolian carvings, she assumed she was looking at a fairly standard ancient star map, the kind of astronomical record that early civilizations often created to track seasonal changes or navigate across vast distances. But as her analysis progressed, she discovered something that challenged everything she understood about ancient astronomy and humanity's place in the cosmos. The carved stellar patterns weren't depicting the night sky as seen from Earth 12,000 years ago. They were showing star positions as they would appear from somewhere else entirely, a vantage point so distant from our solar system that it suggested observation from a world orbiting a completely different star. Mitchell's initial approach had been straightforward. Using computer modeling to reconstruct the night sky as it appeared from the Anatolian plateau 12,000 years ago, she expected to find correlations between the carved patterns and known stellar positions. Ancient peoples often recorded the positions of prominent stars and constellations, creating permanent records that helped them track seasonal changes and navigate during long journeys. The first calculations seemed to confirm this assumption. Several of the carved patterns matched stellar alignments that would have been visible from the site during the estimated creation period. The angular relationships between star positions showed the mathematical precision that had become characteristic of everything found at the site. But as Mitchell expanded her analysis to include more of the carved astronomical data, disturbing discrepancies began to emerge. The problem wasn't with individual star positions, it was with the relationships between different stellar objects. When Mitchell attempted to map the complete astronomical picture suggested by the carvings, the stellar patterns described a night sky that had never been visible from Earth during any historical period. The angular distances between constellations were wrong. The relative brightness of different stars didn't match their apparent magnitude as seen from our solar system. Most disturbing of all, several of the carved stellar objects corresponded to stars that weren't visible from Earth without advanced telescopic equipment. Dr. James Kellerman from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics initially dismissed Mitchell's findings as calculation errors. As one of the world's leading experts in archaeoastronomy, he'd analyzed astronomical alignments in everything from Stonehenge to Mayan pyramid complexes. Every legitimate ancient astronomical record showed recognizable relationships to actual stellar phenomena as observed from Earth. The idea that 12,000-year-old stone carvings might depict star positions from an alien perspective was, in his opinion, astronomical impossibility masquerading as scholarship. But when Kellerman examined Mitchell's mathematical modeling, his skepticism began to waver. The stellar relationships weren't random or symbolic. They formed coherent astronomical patterns that followed logical astrophysical principles. The angular measurements between stars showed the same mathematical precision found throughout the site. The relative positioning of celestial objects demonstrated understanding of stellar mechanics that wouldn't be achieved by Earth-based astronomy until the modern era. The carved patterns included stellar objects that presented another fundamental problem. Several of the astronomical markers corresponded to stars that were invisible to naked eye observation from Earth's surface. These weren't bright, prominent stars that ancient peoples might naturally record. They were dim, distant objects that required telescopic magnification to detect. Some corresponded to stellar phenomena that weren't discovered by Earth-based astronomy until the 20th century. Mitchell's analysis revealed that the astronomical perspective suggested by the carvings would require observation from a planetary position approximately 37 light-years from Earth. The stellar patterns matched what observers would see from a world orbiting within the habitable zone of a G-type star similar to our Sun, but located in a completely different region of the galaxy. The ancient carvers had somehow created astronomical charts depicting the night sky as seen from an alien solar system. The precision of these alien astronomical observations exceeded anything found in Earth-based ancient astronomy. The carved stellar positions were accurate to fractions of degrees, showing understanding of stellar parallax and proper motion that required sustained observation across multiple generations. The mathematical relationships incorporated corrections for stellar aberration and other relativistic effects that weren't discovered until Einstein's theories revolutionized 20th century physics. Professor Elena Vasquez found that the astronomical anomalies correlated perfectly with the geographical coordinate problems she'd discovered. The alien star maps and the impossible geography appeared to be depicting the same world, a planet orbiting a distant star, with geographical features and astronomical perspectives that could never be observed from Earth. The ancient carvers hadn't just imagined an alien world, they had created detailed records of its actual astronomical and geographical characteristics. The stellar patterns also revealed evidence of advanced astronomical knowledge that challenged assumptions about ancient scientific capabilities. The carvings included markers for stellar objects that experience regular variability, stars that change brightness according to predictable cycles. Recording such phenomena requires sustained astronomical observation and mathematical analysis that presupposes institutional learning and accumulated knowledge spanning multiple generations. Dr. Kellerman's continued analysis revealed another layer of astronomical sophistication that made the mystery even more profound. The carved patterns weren't just recording stellar positions, they were predicting stellar motion across vast time periods. Several of the astronomical markers showed stars in positions they would occupy thousands of years in the future, accounting for proper motion and galactic rotation with accuracy that required understanding of stellar mechanics and galactic dynamics. The astronomical predictions extended to phenomena that would be invisible without advanced instrumentation. Some of the carved patterns seemed to mark the positions of planets orbiting distant stars, exoplanets that weren't discovered by Earth-based astronomy until sophisticated space-based telescopes became available in the 21st century. The ancient carvers had somehow detected and mapped planetary systems that remained unknown to modern science until recently. Mitchell's attempts to publish her astronomical analysis encountered the same institutional resistance that had blocked other researchers working on the site. Astronomy journals refused to consider papers suggesting ancient maps of alien star systems. Peer reviewers dismissed her calculations without examination, claiming that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence they weren't willing to evaluate. Professional conferences cancelled her presentations, citing concerns about scientific credibility. But the astronomical evidence was independently verifiable by anyone with access to computer modeling software and stellar databases. Researchers in multiple countries confirmed Mitchell's calculations, validating the precision of the stellar measurements and the accuracy of the alien perspective calculations. The carved astronomical data was mathematically sound, astrophysically coherent, and observationally precise, but it depicted a night sky that could never be seen from Earth. The suppression efforts revealed something disturbing about modern scientific institutions. When confronted with evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about human knowledge and cosmic perspective, The response wasn't scientific investigation but professional ostracism. Researchers who validated the astronomical analysis found their careers threatened, their funding reduced, and their access to institutional resources blocked. Kellerman found himself confronting astronomical evidence that contradicted decades of archaeo-astronomical research. The stellar relationships were mathematically precise, observationally accurate, and astrophysically consistent, but they required knowledge of distant star systems that shouldn't have been accessible to ancient observers. Either the 12,000-year-old carvers had possessed impossible astronomical capabilities, or they had somehow obtained observational data from worlds beyond Earth's vicinity. The implications extended beyond astronomy into fundamental questions about human origins and cosmic awareness. If ancient peoples could create accurate star maps from alien perspectives, they must have possessed knowledge that transcended anything found in the archaeological record. Either they had developed theoretical modeling capabilities that exceeded modern astrophysics, or they had somehow obtained direct observational experience from worlds orbiting distant stars. The astronomical precision evident in the alien star maps suggested sustained observation rather than theoretical speculation. The mathematical relationships required institutional learning accumulated over generations. The predictive capabilities demanded understanding of stellar mechanics that presupposed advanced scientific methodology. Somewhere in humanity's forgotten past, people had possessed detailed knowledge of astronomical phenomena from perspectives that modern science was only beginning to acknowledge might be theoretically possible. The star map anomaly represented more than just archaeological mysteries. It suggested that human awareness 12,000 years ago included direct knowledge of other worlds, other solar systems, and other astronomical perspectives. The mathematical precision and observational accuracy of the alien star maps indicated that this wasn't speculation or imagination, but detailed astronomical data obtained through methods that remained incomprehensible to modern science. What remained was a question that challenged every assumption about human knowledge and cosmic isolation. How had ancient humans obtained precise astronomical observations from perspectives located dozens of light-years from Earth? The mathematical accuracy suggested direct observation rather than theoretical modeling. The predictive capabilities indicated sustained study rather than casual speculation. The evidence pointed toward an inescapable conclusion that would force scientists to confront possibilities about human origins and capabilities that had been relegated to the realm of science fiction. Dr. Marcus Fleming had spent 25 years cataloguing unexplained archaeological discoveries in museums and private collections around the world. As keeper of the British Museum's classified archive, he'd encountered thousands of artifacts that didn't fit conventional historical narratives. Objects that were quietly shelved rather than displayed, specimens that challenged established timelines, and discoveries that suggested capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology was willing to acknowledge. But when Eleanor Vasquez contacted him about the Anatolian coordinate anomalies, Fleming realized he might be looking at something far more significant than isolated archaeological puzzles. Hidden in dusty storage rooms and forgotten museum collections were dozens of similar artifacts, ancient maps and astronomical records that seemed to depict the same impossible world that had been carved into Turkish stone 12,000 years ago. The first connection emerged from Fleming's examination of the Schoyen collection, a private archive of ancient manuscripts and artifacts housed in Norway. Among the thousands of items acquired from archaeological sites worldwide was a set of bronze tablets recovered from a Mesopotamian site in 1947. The tablets bore geometric engravings that museum curators had classified as decorative religious symbols, but Fleming's analysis revealed coordinate relationships identical to those found in the Anatolian carvings. The Mesopotamian tablets dated to approximately 8,000 years ago, 4,000 years after the Turkish site, but they displayed the same mathematical precision, the same impossible geographical relationships, and the same astronomical alignments pointing to an alien perspective. The bronze tablets weren't religious artifacts. They were continuation of the same mapping project that had begun on the Anatolian mountainside. Professor Chen Wei from Beijing University had encountered similar anomalies during her research into ancient Chinese astronomical records. In 1982, construction workers in Hunan province had uncovered a cache of jade discs bearing intricate geometric patterns that bore no resemblance to known Chinese astronomical or mathematical systems. Carbon dating placed the discs at approximately 9,000 years old, and mathematical analysis revealed coordinate relationships that perfectly matched the Turkish and Mesopotamian discoveries. The Chinese artifacts had been quietly archived after initial analysis proved inconclusive. The geometric patterns were too sophisticated for the supposed technological level of Neolithic Chinese cultures, and the mathematical relationships didn't correspond to any known astronomical phenomena as observed from Earth. Rather than challenge established archaeological narratives, the discs were classified as ceremonial objects of unknown purpose and removed from public display. Fleming's investigation revealed a pattern of systematic suppression spanning multiple continents and archaeological institutions. In 1968, excavations at Çatalhöyük in Turkey had uncovered clay tablets bearing geometric engravings similar to those found at the Anatolian site. The tablets were initially reported as significant discoveries, but subsequent analysis was quietly discontinued when dating results proved inconsistent with accepted timelines for human technological development. The Australian National Museum housed similar artifacts recovered from Aboriginal sites in the Northern Territory. Ochre paintings on rock surfaces displayed geometric patterns that incorporated the same mathematical constants found in the Mediterranean and Asian discoveries. Radiocarbon dating of organic pigments placed these paintings at over 10,000 years old, predating supposed contact between Aboriginal peoples and advanced mathematical traditions by millennia. Dr. Patricia Voss from the Smithsonian Institution had documented comparable discoveries throughout the Americas. Carved stone monuments in Peru, geometric earthworks in Ohio, and astronomical alignments in Mexico all displayed mathematical relationships that correlated with Fleming's growing database of impossible ancient knowledge. Each discovery had been individually dismissed as coincidence, misinterpretation, or dating error, but collectively they formed a pattern that suggested a global phenomenon. The most disturbing aspect of Fleming's research was the institutional coordination of the suppression efforts. Internal documents obtained through freedom of information. Requests revealed communication between museums, universities, and government agencies aimed at limiting public access to discoveries that challenged conventional historical narratives. Artifacts were reclassified, researchers were reassigned, and funding was redirected away from investigations that might validate impossible timelines. The suppression wasn't limited to academic institutions. Fleming discovered that several significant discoveries had been acquired by private collectors and removed from scientific study entirely. The Peary Reyes map, which showed Antarctica without ice, had disappeared into private hands after generating too much controversy about ancient geographical knowledge. Other maps and astronomical charts with similar anomalies had been quietly purchased by unknown collectors and removed from public examination. Dr. Vasquez's analysis of Fleming's artifact database revealed something extraordinary. The geometric patterns found at sites worldwide weren't random variations on common themes. They were pieces of a coherent global mapping project. Coordinate relationships from Chinese jade discs complemented geographical data from Mesopotamian bronze tablets. Astronomical alignments from American earthworks correlated with stellar patterns from Australian rock paintings. Ancient peoples worldwide had been participating in a unified effort to map the same alien world. The mathematical precision was consistent across all discoveries, regardless of their geographical origin or supposed cultural background. Whether carved in stone in Turkey, inscribed on bronze in Iraq, painted on rock in Australia, or built into earthworks in America, the geometric relationships displayed identical levels of sophistication and accuracy. This suggested not just shared knowledge, but coordinated effort by people who possessed common mathematical and astronomical capabilities. Fleming's investigation revealed that the suppression efforts had been ongoing for over a century. Early 20th century archaeologists had documented similar discoveries, but had been unable to publish findings that contradicted established historical narratives. Professional careers had been destroyed, research funding had been eliminated, and entire archaeological expeditions had been quietly discontinued when their discoveries proved too controversial for institutional comfort. The pattern extended to modern discoveries as well. Satellite archaeology and ground-penetrating radar had revealed hundreds of additional sites worldwide that displayed similar geometric patterns, but follow-up excavations were consistently denied permits or defunded when preliminary analysis suggested impossible timelines. The archaeological establishment seemed more committed to protecting existing narratives than investigating potentially revolutionary evidence. Professor Chen's analysis of the Chinese discoveries revealed another layer of the mystery. The jade discs weren't just mapping coordinates, they included mathematical tables that seemed to be calculating travel distances and time intervals between different geographical locations. The calculations assumed transportation methods that could cover vast distances in time periods that would be impossible using any known ancient technology. The discs suggested not just knowledge of alien geography, but actual experience traveling between distant locations. The global distribution of the artifacts raised profound questions about ancient communication and coordination. How had peoples separated by thousands of miles and supposedly centuries of time managed to participate in the same mapping project? The mathematical consistency suggested direct contact and shared instruction, but conventional archaeology maintained that such widespread communication networks didn't exist until much later historical periods. Dr. Voss's documentation of American sites revealed evidence of the same coordinate systems found in Asian and Middle Eastern discoveries. Geometric earthworks in Ohio incorporated mathematical relationships that perfectly complemented coordinate data from Chinese jade discs. Astronomical alignments in Mexican monuments correlated with stellar patterns found in Turkish stone carvings. Ancient Americans had been using the same mathematical principles and mapping the same alien geography as their counterparts on other continents. The archaeological evidence suggested something that challenged every assumption about ancient human capabilities and global awareness. 12,000 years ago, people worldwide had possessed not just advanced mathematical and astronomical knowledge, but coordinated understanding of alien geography and stellar systems. They had participated in a global project that involved mapping worlds that existed beyond Earth's immediate vicinity, using mathematical precision that exceeded most modern capabilities. Fleming's database revealed over 200 authenticated artifacts from 6 continents that displayed coordinate relationships pointing to the same alien world. The geographical patterns were consistent, the astronomical alignments were identical, and the mathematical precision was uniform across all discoveries. This wasn't coincidence or misinterpretation. It was evidence of a coordinated global effort by ancient peoples who possessed knowledge that transcended anything found in conventional historical records. The suppression of this evidence revealed something disturbing about modern institutional priorities. Rather than investigating discoveries that might revolutionize understanding of human origins and capabilities, academic and governmental institutions had chosen to protect established narratives at the expense of scientific truth. The breadcrumbs left by ancient peoples pointed toward revolutionary discoveries about human knowledge and cosmic awareness, but those breadcrumbs were being systematically swept away by institutions more committed to professional comfort than historical accuracy. What remained was a trail of evidence spanning the globe and reaching back over 10 millennia, all pointing toward the same impossible conclusion. Ancient peoples worldwide had possessed detailed knowledge of alien worlds, and they had coordinated their efforts to preserve that knowledge for future generations. The mathematical precision and global consistency of their work suggested capabilities that modern science was only beginning to acknowledge might be theoretically possible. Capabilities that raised profound questions about human origins and humanity's place in a cosmos far stranger than conventional wisdom dared to imagine. The first warning came in the form of a politely worded email from the editorial board of the Journal of Archaeological Science. Dr. Elena Vasquez had submitted her comprehensive analysis of the coordinate anomalies 3 months earlier, complete with mathematical proofs, independent verification, and detailed documentation of similar discoveries worldwide. The rejection was swift, final, and accompanied by a suggestion that she reconsider her career trajectory in light of recent research directions. What followed was a systematic campaign to destroy the careers of everyone associated with the Anatolian discovery. Within 6 months, every researcher who had validated the impossible dating, confirmed the mathematical precision, or documented the global pattern of similar artifacts, found themselves professionally isolated, funding eliminated, and access to institutional resources permanently revoked. Professor James Whitfield's coordination of the suppression effort was revealed through internal emails later obtained by investigative journalist David Chen during his research into academic censorship. The correspondence painted a disturbing picture of institutional coordination aimed not at evaluating scientific evidence, but at protecting established narratives from challenges that might undermine the authority of academic institutions. The implications of validating these findings, Whitfield had written to colleagues at Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard, extend far beyond archaeological timelines. If we acknowledge that 12,000-year-old humans possessed advanced knowledge of alien worlds, we effectively admit that our entire understanding of human development has been fundamentally wrong. The credibility of our institutions depends on maintaining rational boundaries around acceptable discoveries. The academic blackout wasn't limited to archaeology journals. Mathematics publications refused to consider papers documenting the geometric precision of the carvings. Astronomy journals rejected submissions analyzing the alien stellar perspectives. Geography publications declined to review coordinate analysis that suggested mapping of non-terrestrial worlds. Every academic discipline involved in analyzing the discoveries had independently decided that the evidence was too controversial for scholarly consideration. Dr. Margaret Chen's experience revealed the personal cost of challenging institutional narratives. After 20 years of respected research in carbon dating methodology, her validation of the 12,000-year-old samples resulted in immediate professional ostracism. Conference invitations were withdrawn, research funding was eliminated, and her laboratory access was quietly revoked. Colleagues who had collaborated with her for decades suddenly became unavailable for consultation or comment. the suppression extended beyond individual researchers to entire research programs. The Turkish government, initially enthusiastic about the potential significance of the discovery, quietly restricted access to the site after pressure from international archaeological organizations. Permits for additional excavation were denied, samples were confiscated, and the site was effectively placed off-limits to scientific investigation. Internal documents from the Turkish Ministry of Culture revealed the nature of the international pressure. Archaeological institutions from Europe and America had threatened to boycott Turkish research projects and exclude Turkish scholars from international conferences if the government continued to support investigation of the anomalous findings. The implicit message was clear: conform to acceptable narratives or face professional isolation. Professor David Ashworth's mathematical analysis had been independently verified by specialists from universities across 3 continents, but none of those institutions were willing to publicly acknowledge their validation. Private correspondence revealed that mathematical departments had been warned about the career consequences of associating with research that challenged established archaeological timelines. Even mathematical proofs that were beyond dispute became professionally toxic when applied to controversial archaeological discoveries. The blackout revealed something disturbing about the nature of modern academic institutions. Rather than functioning as centers of open inquiry, committed to following evidence wherever it might lead, they had become gatekeepers of acceptable knowledge, more concerned with maintaining institutional authority than investigating potentially revolutionary discoveries. The scientific method itself had been subordinated to political considerations about professional reputation and institutional credibility. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's astronomical calculations had been verified using multiple independent computer models and stellar databases, but astronomy departments worldwide refused to acknowledge her work. Journal editors claimed her conclusions were insufficiently grounded in observational astronomy, despite the fact that her analysis was based entirely on precise observational data carved in stone 12,000 years ago. The coordination of the suppression effort extended to government agencies and funding institutions. Research grants that might support investigation of anomalous archaeological discoveries were quietly eliminated. Government contracts for archaeological research included specific clauses excluding investigation of sites or artifacts that might challenge established historical timelines. Academic institutions were financially incentivized to avoid controversial research directions. Fleming's documentation of similar discoveries worldwide had revealed a pattern of systematic suppression spanning over a century, but his attempts to publish a comprehensive analysis of the institutional cover-up were met with legal threats from multiple universities and museums. Collections that had housed anomalous artifacts for decades suddenly claimed that documentation had been lost or that artifacts had been misidentified. Evidence that had been catalogued and studied for years mysteriously became unavailable for independent verification. The most disturbing aspect of the academic blackout was the revelation that suppression efforts were being coordinated at the highest levels of academic and governmental institutions. Internal communications revealed regular meetings between university administrators, museum directors, and government officials aimed at identifying and neutralizing research that might challenge established narratives about human development and technological capabilities. Professor Chen Wei's investigation of Chinese artifacts had been quietly terminated when her preliminary findings suggested connections to the Mediterranean discoveries. University administrators claimed budget constraints, but internal documents revealed that funding had been redirected to ensure that her research couldn't continue. Similar terminations occurred at universities worldwide whenever researchers began documenting the global pattern of anomalous discoveries. The blackout extended to public education and media coverage. Science documentaries that attempted to explore the chronological controversies found their funding withdrawn or their broadcast schedules mysteriously altered. Educational institutions that included discussion of the discoveries in their curriculum were encouraged to focus on dating methodology problems, rather than the implications of the evidence itself. Dr. Vasquez found herself facing a choice between abandoning her research or accepting professional destruction. Universities that had competed to hire her suddenly claimed budget constraints prevented job offers. Research institutions that had previously funded her work explained that their priorities had shifted toward more conventional archaeological investigations. The message was unmistakable: conform to acceptable research directions or face career termination. The suppression efforts revealed the extent to which modern academic institutions were willing to abandon scientific principles to protect institutional authority. Evidence that was mathematically precise, independently verified, and scientifically sound became professionally unacceptable when it challenged established narratives. The academic establishment had chosen institutional comfort over scientific truth, but the blackout also revealed something else. The evidence itself was so compelling, and the institutional response so extreme, that suppression had become the only alternative to acknowledging revolutionary discoveries about human capabilities and cosmic awareness. If the mathematical proofs were wrong, the dating was inaccurate, or the global patterns were coincidental, simple scientific refutation would have been sufficient. The extraordinary efforts required to suppress the research suggested that the evidence was not just accurate, but profoundly threatening to established institutional authority. Independent researchers working outside traditional academic institutions began documenting the suppression efforts themselves, creating a parallel network of investigation that operated beyond the reach of institutional control. Online databases catalogued suppressed discoveries, independent verification networks validated controversial findings, and alternative publication platforms made suppressed research available to scholars worldwide. The academic blackout had succeeded in preventing mainstream acknowledgement of the discoveries, but it had also created a shadow network of researchers committed to investigating evidence that institutional authorities preferred to ignore. The suppression itself had become evidence of the revolutionary nature of the discoveries, suggesting that the implications of acknowledging advanced ancient knowledge were so profound that entire academic disciplines would rather abandon scientific principles than confront the truth about human origins and capabilities. What emerged from the blackout was a clear picture of institutional priorities that placed professional comfort above scientific investigation. The evidence pointed toward revolutionary discoveries about ancient human knowledge and cosmic awareness, but academic institutions had chosen to suppress that evidence rather than acknowledge implications that might challenge their authority and credibility. The blackout revealed not just the power of the discoveries, but the extent to which modern institutions were willing to compromise scientific integrity to protect established narratives about human development and humanity's place in the cosmos. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a laboratory shielded from electromagnetic interference and cosmic radiation, Dr. Klaus Weber examined microscopic samples of stone from the Anatolian carvings under the most advanced analytical equipment available to modern science. What he discovered challenged not just archaeological timelines, but the fundamental understanding of how technology develops and what ancient humans might have been capable of achieving. The tool marks left in the stone revealed cutting patterns that shouldn't have been possible with any known ancient technology. Under electron microscope magnification, the carved surfaces showed characteristics that modern materials scientists associated with precision machining using hardened metal implements, tools that required metallurgical capabilities far beyond anything found in the archaeological record from 12,000 years ago. Weber's initial analysis focused on the molecular structure of the carved surfaces. When stone is cut using primitive tools, the fracture patterns show irregular stress characteristics typical of percussion-based cutting methods. The crystalline structure is disrupted in predictable ways that reflect the mechanical properties of stone tools striking rock surfaces, but the Anatolian samples showed none of these characteristics. Instead, the molecular analysis revealed smooth, uniform cutting patterns that suggested the use of extremely hard, precisely shaped implements. The stone had been sliced rather than chipped, with cuts that penetrated the crystalline matrix without creating the stress fractures typical of primitive tool use. The precision suggested cutting implements harder than the stone itself, shaped to exact specifications and applied with mechanical consistency that exceeded human hand coordination. Professor Maria Santos from the Institute of Materials Science in Barcelona had encountered similar anomalies during her analysis of tool marks from other suppressed archaeological sites. Stone monuments from Easter Island, carved megaliths from Peru, and precision-cut blocks from Egypt all showed microscopic evidence of advanced cutting technology that contradicted accepted timelines for human technological development. The metallurgical implications were profound. Creating tools capable of such precision cutting would require not just advanced metalworking, but understanding of material science principles that weren't formally discovered until the industrial age. The hardness characteristics suggested the use of steel alloys or possibly even more advanced materials that could maintain sharp cutting edges while resisting wear during extended use. Dr. Weber's spectrographic analysis revealed another disturbing anomaly. Microscopic traces of metal residue found in some of the carved grooves showed elemental compositions that didn't match any known ancient metallurgical traditions. The metal traces contained isotopic ratios that suggested purification techniques far beyond anything achievable with primitive smelting methods. The isotopic analysis indicated that whoever had created the cutting tools possessed understanding of atomic structure and isotopic separation that presupposed knowledge of nuclear physics. The metal purification suggested capabilities that modern industry had achieved only through advanced chemical and physical processes. Ancient peoples had somehow created materials that required technological capabilities equivalent to modern industrial civilization. Professor Santos's investigation revealed that the advanced cutting technology wasn't limited to the Anatolian site. Similar tool marks had been documented at megalithic sites worldwide, but the evidence had been systematically ignored or explained away by archaeologists unwilling to acknowledge implications that challenged established technological timelines. The precision cutting technology appeared to be part of the same global phenomenon that had produced the coordinate mapping and astronomical knowledge. The cutting patterns also revealed evidence of mechanical assistance that suggested the use of powered tools rather than hand-operated implements. The consistency of cut depth and the uniformity of surface texture indicated cutting speeds and pressure application that exceeded human physical capabilities. The ancient carvers had somehow possessed not just advanced cutting tools, but mechanical systems capable of providing consistent power and precision during extended cutting operations. Dr. Weber's analysis of the geometric precision revealed another layer of technological sophistication. The mathematical accuracy of the carved lines required measurement and layout capabilities that presupposed understanding of precision instrumentation. Creating geometric patterns accurate to hundredths of degrees would demand measuring tools and mathematical calculation methods that weren't supposed to exist until thousands of years later. The surveying implications were equally profound. Maintaining geometric precision across the vast distances covered by the carved patterns would require surveying instruments capable of accurate measurement over multiple kilometers. The coordination between different sections of the carvings suggested the use of optical instruments and mathematical triangulation methods that presupposed advanced understanding of engineering principles. Professor Santos discovered that the precision wasn't limited to individual measurements. It extended to the coordination between separate carved elements across vast distances. This suggested the use of communication systems that could coordinate work crews separated by kilometers of difficult terrain. The technological infrastructure required for such coordination would presuppose organizational capabilities and communication methods far beyond anything attributed to 12,000-year-old societies. The stone itself showed evidence of preparation techniques that challenged assumptions about ancient quarrying and stone-working capabilities. Microscopic analysis revealed that the rock surfaces had been prepared using methods that created uniform texture and consistent hardness characteristics. This suggested understanding of geological principles and stone treatment techniques that presupposed advanced knowledge of materials science. Dr. Weber's investigation of the carving sequence revealed evidence of planning and execution methods that required sophisticated project management capabilities. The carved patterns showed evidence of systematic progression, with different sections completed according to predetermined schedules that maintained mathematical precision across the entire project. This suggested organizational technologies that could coordinate complex multi-phase construction projects. The preservation of the carvings also revealed advanced understanding of weathering and erosion processes. The carved patterns had been designed to resist environmental degradation, with mathematical relationships that remained precise despite 12,000 years of exposure to natural forces. This suggested engineering knowledge that could predict and compensate for long-term environmental effects. Professor Santos's analysis revealed that the technological sophistication wasn't limited to cutting and carving techniques. The overall project showed evidence of logistical capabilities that could support large work crews in remote locations for extended periods. This suggested transportation systems, supply chains, and organizational methods that presupposed technological infrastructure far beyond anything found in the conventional archaeological record. The implications extended beyond individual technologies to entire technological systems. Creating the Anatolian carvings would have required not just advanced cutting tools, but precision measuring instruments, sophisticated surveying equipment, reliable communication methods, efficient transportation systems, and organizational technologies capable of coordinating complex multi-phase projects. The technological infrastructure suggested capabilities equivalent to modern industrial civilization. Dr. Weber found himself confronting evidence that challenged every assumption about the relationship between technological development and historical timelines. The sophisticated technologies evident in the carvings hadn't emerged gradually through thousands of years of accumulated learning. They had appeared fully developed 12,000 years ago, then had somehow disappeared without leaving traces in the conventional archaeological record. The suppression of this technological evidence revealed the same institutional resistance that had characterized every aspect of the Anatolian investigation. Materials science journals refused to consider papers documenting advanced ancient metallurgy. Engineering publications declined to review analysis of sophisticated construction techniques. Academic institutions warned researchers about the career consequences of associating with technological interpretations that challenged established developmental timelines. But the microscopic evidence couldn't be suppressed entirely. Independent verification by materials scientists from universities worldwide confirmed Weber's analysis. The cutting patterns were real, the metallurgical evidence was accurate, and the technological implications were undeniable. Ancient peoples had possessed technological capabilities that exceeded anything found in the historical record, capabilities that suggested a level of scientific and engineering knowledge comparable to modern industrial civilization. The technological evidence correlated perfectly with the mathematical precision, geographical accuracy, and astronomical sophistication documented by other researchers. The same people who had created detailed maps of alien worlds and precise records of stellar positions from impossible perspectives had also possessed technological capabilities that allowed them to execute massive engineering projects with precision that challenged modern construction methods. What remained was a question that challenged every assumption about human technological development. How had 12,000-year-old peoples possessed not just advanced individual technologies, but entire technological systems comparable to modern industrial capabilities? The evidence suggested that human technological achievement 12,000 years ago had reached levels that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era, and then had somehow vanished so completely that its existence had been forgotten by every subsequent civilization. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in her private study, surrounded by 8 years of accumulated evidence that pointed toward a conclusion so radical it challenged every assumption about human origins, ancient history, and humanity's place in the cosmos. The mathematical precision was undeniable. The technological sophistication was beyond dispute. The astronomical accuracy was independently verified. The global coordination was documented across 6 continents. But following the evidence to its logical conclusion required acknowledging possibilities that most of her colleagues considered professional suicide. The coordinate systems carved into stone 12,000 years ago depicted geographical features of a world that existed nowhere in our solar system. The stellar alignments showed astronomical perspectives that could only be observed from planets orbiting distant stars. The mathematical relationships incorporated knowledge of physics and engineering that surpassed most modern capabilities. The technological infrastructure required to create these monuments suggested industrial-level civilization during humanity's supposed Stone Age. Taken individually, each piece of evidence might be explained away through creative interpretation or selective skepticism, but when analyzed as a coherent whole, the accumulated data pointed toward a conclusion that was as inescapable as it was revolutionary. The people who created these monuments possessed knowledge that could only have been obtained through contact with or origin from an advanced civilization that was not terrestrial in nature. Professor James Harrison from the Royal Geographic Society had initially dismissed the coordinate anomalies as calculation errors, but 8 years of continued analysis had forced him to confront the mathematical precision of the alien geography. The carved patterns weren't depicting Earth because they weren't supposed to depict Earth. They were detailed maps of another world, created by people who had somehow obtained direct observational knowledge of planetary systems beyond our immediate vicinity. The astronomical evidence provided even stronger support for non-terrestrial origins. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's calculations had demonstrated that the stellar alignments depicted night skies as observed from worlds orbiting distant stars. The precision wasn't approximate or symbolic. It was mathematically exact, requiring observational data that could only be obtained through direct experience of alien astronomical perspectives. Dr. Marcus Fleming's documentation of similar discoveries worldwide revealed that the extraterrestrial knowledge wasn't limited to isolated groups or individual discoveries. Ancient peoples across every continent had participated in coordinated efforts to preserve detailed information about alien worlds, alien star systems, and alien astronomical perspectives. The global coordination suggested not random contact, but systematic instruction by non-terrestrial sources. the technological evidence provided physical confirmation of capabilities that exceeded anything achievable through conventional human development. Dr. Klaus Weber's microscopic analysis had revealed tool marks and metallurgical traces that required industrial-level technology during periods when humans were supposedly using stone implements. The precision cutting, advanced materials, and sophisticated engineering suggested technological capabilities that could only be explained through contact with advanced non-terrestrial civilization. Professor David Ashworth's mathematical analysis had documented geometric relationships and calculation methods that incorporated knowledge of physics principles not formally discovered until the modern era. The ancient carvers had understood concepts from advanced mathematics, relativistic physics, and quantum mechanics that presupposed scientific knowledge far beyond anything achievable through conventional human intellectual development. The dating evidence eliminated any possibility that these achievements represented advanced human civilizations from more recent historical periods. Carbon dating, independently verified by multiple laboratories, consistently placed the monuments at 12,000 years ago, firmly within the period when humans were supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers with no permanent settlements, no writing systems, and no advanced technologies. The suppression evidence revealed that academic and governmental institutions had recognized the revolutionary implications of the discoveries and had chosen systematic cover-up rather than honest investigation. The extraordinary efforts required to suppress scientifically valid research suggested that institutional authorities understood the evidence pointed toward conclusions that would fundamentally alter human understanding of origins, development, and cosmic significance. Dr. Vasquez found herself confronting a paradigm shift that extended far beyond archaeology or ancient history. If 12,000-year-old humans had possessed detailed knowledge of alien worlds, precise astronomical data from extraterrestrial perspectives, and technological capabilities that exceeded conventional development, then either human origins were fundamentally different from accepted narratives, or human contact with non-terrestrial intelligence was far more extensive than mainstream science was willing to acknowledge. The geographical precision of the alien maps suggested not casual contact, but sustained interaction with non-terrestrial sources. The mathematical accuracy required generations of instruction and learning. The technological sophistication demanded transfer of advanced scientific knowledge. The global coordination presupposed communication networks that could span continents and coordinate activities across vast distances and extended time periods. Professor Chen Wei's analysis of the Chinese artifacts had revealed evidence that the extraterrestrial knowledge included practical information about interplanetary travel and navigation. The jade discs contained mathematical tables that calculated distances and time intervals between different worlds, suggesting that ancient peoples possessed not just theoretical knowledge of alien planets, but practical experience traveling between different solar systems. The implications challenged fundamental assumptions about human isolation and terrestrial development. If ancient humans had maintained contact with non-terrestrial intelligence, then human technological and intellectual development might have been guided or influenced by sources beyond Earth. The sudden appearance of advanced capabilities 12,000 years ago, followed by their systematic disappearance from the historical record, suggested contact that had been deliberately terminated or systematically suppressed. Dr. Mitchell's astronomical calculations revealed that the stellar perspectives depicted in the ancient monuments corresponded to specific time periods and planetary positions that could be calculated using modern astrophysics. The aliens' star maps weren't depicting random or theoretical astronomical configurations. They showed actual stellar relationships as they existed during specific historical periods, as observed from worlds that existed in precisely calculable locations within distant solar systems. The precision of these astronomical records suggested that the extraterrestrial contact had involved actual observational experience of other worlds rather than theoretical communication of abstract knowledge. The ancient carvers had possessed detailed information about alien geography, alien astronomy, and alien stellar relationships because they had somehow obtained direct observational experience of these phenomena. Fleming's investigation revealed that the pattern of extraterrestrial knowledge extended throughout recorded history, but had been systematically suppressed by religious and academic institutions committed to maintaining terrestrial-centered narratives about human development. Similar discoveries had been documented and then buried by successive civilizations, suggesting that knowledge of non-terrestrial contact had been repeatedly suppressed throughout human history. The technological evidence suggested that the extraterrestrial contact had involved transfer of advanced scientific knowledge that had enabled ancient humans to achieve technological capabilities comparable to modern industrial civilization. The sophisticated tools, precision engineering, and advanced materials found at ancient sites worldwide represented practical application of scientific principles that could only have been obtained through instruction by technologically advanced, non-terrestrial sources. Dr. Weber's materials analysis revealed that the metallurgical sophistication found in ancient tool traces incorporated isotopic purification techniques that required understanding of atomic structure and nuclear physics. The advanced materials suggested that ancient peoples had access to scientific knowledge that exceeded anything achievable through conventional terrestrial development during the periods in question. The extraterrestrial conclusion wasn't based on speculation or interpretation. It was the inevitable result of following scientifically verified evidence to its logical endpoints. The mathematical precision was documented. The technological sophistication was verified. The astronomical accuracy was confirmed. The global coordination was established. The systematic suppression was proven. When all the evidence was considered together, extraterrestrial contact or origin represented the only explanation that could account for the full scope of ancient human capabilities. What remained was a question that challenged every institution committed to terrestrial-centered narratives about human development. If the evidence so clearly documented extensive ancient contact with non-terrestrial intelligence, why had this knowledge been so systematically suppressed throughout recorded history? The answer suggested that acknowledging extraterrestrial contact would require fundamental revision of religious, academic, and governmental narratives about human origins, development, and cosmic significance, revisions that institutional authorities had consistently chosen to prevent rather than acknowledge. The extraterrestrial conclusion represented more than just archaeological discovery. It suggested that human history, human capabilities, and human cosmic awareness had been fundamentally different from conventional narratives for thousands of years. The evidence pointed toward ancient contact that had provided humans with knowledge and capabilities far beyond terrestrial development. Contact that had been systematically hidden from public awareness by institutions committed to maintaining control over acceptable knowledge about human origins and humanity's place in a cosmos far stranger and more interconnected than official narratives dared to acknowledge. In the spring of 2025, nearly a decade after Captain Durupanar's aerial discovery, the Anatolian site remained officially classified as an archaeological anomaly of undetermined significance. The 12,000-year-old stone carvings that had revealed impossible mathematical precision, alien geographical coordinates, and extraterrestrial astronomical perspectives were accessible only to researchers with special permits that were routinely denied for preservation concerns. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become persona non grata in mainstream archaeological circles, her revolutionary discoveries relegated to fringe publications and alternative research networks that operated beyond institutional control. Despite mathematical verification by specialists worldwide, astronomical confirmation by independent observatories, and technological validation by materials scientists across multiple continents, her work remained excluded from academic journals, university curricula, and government-funded research programs. The systematic suppression had evolved from crude censorship to sophisticated information management. Rather than simply rejecting papers that documented extraterrestrial evidence, academic institutions had developed elaborate peer review processes designed to delay, obscure, and ultimately discredit research that challenged terrestrial-centered narratives. Researchers who attempted to investigate anomalous discoveries found their methodologies questioned, their funding eliminated, and their career advancement permanently blocked. Professor James Whitfield's coordination of the suppression effort had expanded into an international network involving universities, museums, government agencies, and media organizations across multiple countries. Internal communications revealed detailed strategies for managing public perception of archaeological discoveries, ensuring that evidence pointing toward extraterrestrial contact remained buried beneath layers of academic bureaucracy and professional ostracism. The Turkish government had quietly reclassified the Anatolian site as a cultural heritage location, requiring special protection from inappropriate scientific intervention. Access permits were limited to researchers whose work focused on conventional archaeological interpretations that didn't challenge established historical timelines. Scientists seeking to conduct advanced analysis of the geometric precision or astronomical alignments found their applications indefinitely delayed or summarily rejected. Dr. Marcus Fleming's documentation of similar discoveries worldwide had revealed that the suppression extended far beyond individual sites or specific research projects. Museums had reclassified artifacts, private collections had been acquired by unknown buyers and removed from scientific access, and entire archaeological expeditions had been quietly discontinued when their preliminary findings suggested evidence of advanced ancient capabilities or extraterrestrial contact. The media management strategy had proven particularly effective at controlling public awareness of the discoveries. Science documentaries that attempted to explore the evidence were either cancelled during production or edited to focus on methodological controversies, rather than the revolutionary implications of the findings. Educational institutions that included discussion of the anomalous discoveries in their curricula were encouraged to present them as examples of problematic research rather than legitimate scientific evidence. International archaeological organizations had developed coordinated policies for handling discoveries that might challenge established narratives. The World Archaeological Congress had quietly adopted guidelines discouraging investigation of sites or artifacts that produced chronologically inconsistent dating results. UNESCO had modified its cultural heritage protocols to limit access to sites that generated controversial interpretations of ancient human capabilities. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's astronomical calculations had been independently verified by observatories worldwide, but those institutions refused to acknowledge their validation publicly. Academic astronomy departments had been warned about the career consequences of associating with research that suggested ancient knowledge of extraterrestrial astronomical perspectives. Even mathematical proofs that were beyond scientific dispute became professionally toxic when applied to evidence of alien contact. The suppression had created a shadow network of independent researchers who operated outside traditional academic institutions, sharing discoveries through alternative publication platforms and private communication networks. Online databases documented suppressed evidence. Encrypted communication systems protected researchers from institutional retaliation, and international collaborations bypassed national censorship efforts. But the shadow network also revealed the global scope of the cover-up. Similar suppression efforts were documented in China, Australia, South America, and North America, suggesting coordination at levels that transcended individual governments or academic institutions. The systematic nature of the cover-up implied involvement by organizations with resources and authority that exceeded conventional academic or governmental capabilities. Dr. Klaus Weber's materials analysis had provided physical evidence of advanced ancient technology that couldn't be dismissed through methodological criticism or interpretive skepticism. The microscopic tool marks, metallurgical traces, and engineering precision were objectively measurable and independently verifiable. Yet materials science journals refused to publish research that suggested 12,000-year-old humans had possessed industrial-level technological capabilities. The financial aspects of the suppression revealed another layer of institutional coordination. Research funding for projects that might validate anomalous discoveries had been systematically eliminated across multiple countries and funding agencies. Grant applications that included investigation of advanced ancient capabilities were routinely rejected, while funding was redirected toward research that supported conventional developmental timelines. Professor Chen Wei had documented similar suppression efforts in China, where government authorities had restricted access to archaeological sites that produced evidence of advanced ancient knowledge. The coordination between Chinese and Western suppression efforts suggested international cooperation at levels that transcended normal academic or diplomatic channels. The legal framework supporting the suppression had been quietly modified through legislative changes that gave government agencies increased authority over archaeological research and artifact access. Cultural heritage laws had been strengthened to prevent inappropriate scientific investigation of sensitive discoveries. International treaties had been modified to coordinate restrictions on research that might challenge established historical narratives. Dr. Vasquez found herself confronting a suppression apparatus that operated at every level of academic, governmental, and media institutions. The evidence pointing toward extraterrestrial contact was scientifically sound, mathematically verified, and independently confirmed, but acknowledging that evidence required confronting institutional authorities committed to maintaining terrestrial-centered narratives about human development and cosmic significance. The continued cover-up revealed something profound about the nature of institutional power and the management of revolutionary knowledge. The discovery of ancient extraterrestrial contact represented more than just archaeological anomaly. It challenged fundamental assumptions about human origins, technological development, and humanity's place in the cosmos. Acknowledging such evidence would require institutions to admit that their authority was based on incomplete or deliberately falsified knowledge about the most basic questions of human existence. The suppression also revealed the extent to which modern societies remained committed to maintaining comfortable illusions rather than confronting potentially disturbing truths about human history and cosmic relationships. The evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact was clear and compelling, but accepting that evidence required acknowledging that human civilization had been fundamentally different from official narratives for thousands of years. Independent verification networks had confirmed every aspect of the Anatolian discoveries, but institutional authorities continued to dismiss or ignore evidence that challenged their credibility and authority. The mathematical precision was verified, the The technological sophistication was documented, the astronomical accuracy was confirmed, the global coordination was established, the extraterrestrial implications were inevitable. Yet the cover-up continued because acknowledging the truth would require institutional authorities to admit that their understanding of human history and cosmic significance had been fundamentally wrong. The Shadow Research Network had grown to include thousands of scientists, researchers, and investigators worldwide who continued to document evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact despite professional risks and institutional opposition. Alternative publication platforms made suppressed research available to anyone willing to examine evidence that mainstream institutions preferred to ignore. International collaborations bypassed national censorship efforts, ensuring that revolutionary discoveries couldn't be permanently buried by institutional authorities. What emerged from a decade of investigation was clear evidence that ancient humans had maintained extensive contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, had possessed advanced knowledge of alien worlds and astronomical systems, and had participated in technological and intellectual achievements that exceeded anything found in conventional historical records. The evidence was scientifically sound, independently verified, and rationally compelling. But the evidence also revealed that institutional authorities at the highest levels of academic, governmental, and media organizations were committed to suppressing this knowledge rather than acknowledging implications that would challenge their authority and credibility. The cover-up continued not because the evidence was inadequate, but because accepting the evidence would require fundamental revision of human understanding about origins, development, and cosmic significance. The Anatolian discovery had opened a window into humanity's true history, a history that included extensive ancient contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, advanced technological capabilities, and cosmic awareness that had been systematically suppressed for millennia. The evidence remained available to anyone willing to examine it honestly, but acknowledging that evidence required confronting the reality that human civilization had been built upon deliberate ignorance of humanity's true origins and cosmic relationships. The cover-up continues because the truth about ancient extraterrestrial contact represents more than just historical revision. It challenges every institution committed to maintaining terrestrial-centered narratives about human development and cosmic isolation. The evidence is clear, the implications are revolutionary, and the suppression is systematic. What remains is the question of whether humanity will continue to accept comfortable lies about its origins, or whether it will finally acknowledge the extraordinary truth about its ancient extraterrestrial heritage that has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years.